Attention inshore saltwater anglers, good news and bad news. The bad news is we are raising the price of the Salt Strong Insider Club by almost 50%, 50 here, very, very soon on June the 1st. The good news is that you can get in today and grandfather your rate in for life. So that means if you're a current member, this does not impact you at all. You are already grandfathered in for life at your rate. So you've got 30 days or less, depending on when you hear this, to get in the club, lock in your rate, because as soon as June 1st hits of 2024, we are raising the prices. After not raising them for 8 years, we have some really, really, really big news coming with smart fishing spots and essentially a fishing guide in your back pocket everywhere from Texas to Florida to New Jersey and everywhere in between. We're going to start giving free Slam Shady for life to all our members, free tackle to test out every single month, and a whole lot more. You do not want to miss out. So once again, if you're a current member and you're in good standing, you are completely fine. Your rate is locked in for as long as you're an active member. But if you're not, this is your last chance to join before the prices go up almost 50%. So join today at saltstrong.com. Here's the podcast.
Welcome to the Salt Strong Podcast, disrupting fishing entertainment as you know it. Prepare to laugh. Prepare to get to know fishing legends in a whole new and unfiltered way.
And on occasion, you might even learn a thing or two about fishing.
Here's your host, Joe Simons. Like diamonds.
Hello, Salt Strong Nation. We are back talking about wade fishing, in particular, how to read a flat. We get a lot of questions about wade fishing, just land-based fishing in general. And the toughest thing for most people is figuring out where they should fish, right? How do I read this area? How do I know if this area is good or not? Because let's face it, got Wader Dave here, who's, I don't know, this is probably your fourth or fifth, maybe even sixth time back on the podcast show. And there's nothing worse than driving to an area and, there's a lot of work that goes into getting out there. You don't have a boat, you don't have a kayak, you can't move around a lot. So you're not to say you're stuck in a spot, but you can't move around as quickly as you would in a boat and go over to the other side of the bay. You kind of want to pick good spots. It's pretty critical when you're wade fishing. You seem to have this somewhat mastered, if you will. I know it's never a completely perfect formula, but what are your thoughts on that, on how to read a flat? Because I'm guessing that's probably the biggest mistake people make, and it's probably the number one reason they're frustrated is they're fishing in a bad zone, not a 90-10 zone.
Yeah, and I think you hit it right on the head. As a wade fisherman, I need to have as many options within wading distance as I possibly can, right? Because I don't have the option, okay, I hit a spot, nothing's going on, I can't hop in the boat and go to the next spot. So I want to find flats or spots that have as many options as possible. So ideally, I want to have a nice big flat that provides a large area with mixed bottom, first of all, right? A mixture of sand and grass. I don't particularly care for spots that are all sand or all grass. I like that mixture. I also like, flats that have mangrove shoreline adjacent, right? That have deep water adjacent. That has a variety of bottom structure, either on or near the flat. Oyster beds, it could be deeper depressions, it could be down trees, it could be rocks, right? A number of things. But so you want all those things to be there or be accessible. So it provides you a lot of options to fish under a number of different circumstances, different tidal conditions, different wind conditions, different seasons. And people say, well, tell me about your winter spots, tell me about your fall spots, tell me about your spring. They're pretty much all the same. I go to mostly the same spots year round. It's just I fish them differently from season to season, right? If I'm on one flat and in the summertime, I may be fishing more up along the mangroves looking for shaded areas, right? Or I want to be on the deeper end where the fish are moving into the deeper water in the summertime. But in the wintertime, I may want a flat that in the afternoons the sun's shining and I know that the fish are going to come up on it, right? But anyway, just want as many options as possible. So once you kind of identify those types of spots that provide you the options, the what I go through in my mind, and I just kind of do it automatically. But the first thing I want to do is I want to know the weather conditions, and most importantly, what direction is the wind blowing, and and how high are the winds going to be, because that's going to kind of dictate, first of all, spots that might be fishable or not, right? I have some spots that are great on a north wind, others that are great on a south wind, west wind, east wind, whatever it might be. So first thing I look at is not only the wind direction, but the wind speed. Then the next thing I want to look at is the tides. Am I going to be fishing on a incoming or outgoing, around the low or around the high? So I really need to understand those conditions to understand am I pick the right spot. And then once I kind of say, okay, I've got a spot that works under whatever the conditions are going to be. It's okay. So how am I going to get in there and attack it? And so typically on a flat, if I'm going to be fishing on higher water, incoming water, right? I'm probably going to start. And I guess again, I divide a flat into two zones. It's either knee deep or less, or knee deep or more, right? And when I'm fishing knee deep or less, I'm typically targeting, redfish and or even snook, right? If I'm knee deep or more, I'm for the most part going to be targeting the trout and maybe some of the other species like that. But
how does that change much when you're fishing in Texas? Because I know right now you're in a whole different area in Florida as we're recording this. So you're all over Florida. You fish Texas a lot. Does this apply everywhere? These same kind of rules?
Yeah, it does. And that's what kind of makes it easy for me. Cool. The rules really pretty much are the same, right? Now in Texas, where I go typically in the Upper Laguna Madre, Baffin Bay areas like that, there's not a lot of tidal movement or change, so the tide isn't necessarily as impactful, but the wind is much more important to understand, right? Here in Florida, depending upon where the tides obviously are much greater. I go up to Cape Cod and we've got 9-10 foot swings in tide. So I might be much more interested in what the tide's going to be like than I am the wind. So there are differences, and it may make you determine, hey, what's more important, tide or wind, and evaluating where what's going to be a good flat and where should I start, right?
Cool.
But so typically I'm going to kind of be wading in and out with the tide for the most part. But let's just say, for instance, if I've got a spot that I've identified, a couple things that I want to do. I want to attack the flat first of all, so that I'm, if at all possible, casting downwind. Right. I want to have long casts and cover as much water as I possibly can with each and every cast. So sometimes that may force me, if my entrance onto a flat, let's just say, is the far east end of the flat, rather than start there, if it's going to have me going from east to west, casting into the wind, I'm going to actually go in and then walk all the way down to the west end of the flat along the shallows, right? And then fish my way back. That's one of the things. But more often than people, hey, I'm in the water, I'm just going to start fishing. And so I prefer just I want to put myself in the best position to cover as much water as possible. So again, ideally, I want to be fishing so I have the wind at my back. The next thing is considering the water depth, right? I love to get to a spot on a flat, and I go to, I'm about knee deep, right? And then I may be casting out, depending upon, if I'm looking for trout, or if I'm looking for redfish or snook, I'm going to be casting back towards the shoreline or towards the mangroves or whatever it might be, if that makes any sense to you. And then if the tide's going out, let's just say, I'm going to kind of be working my way. In this case, I'm just assuming that we've got a flat that kind of runs east to west, and we're going to be, so if we entered at the east end and we're downwind, we're going to walk along the shoreline to the west end so that we can work our way back, right, with the wind behind us. We're going to go out to about knee deep water. So that gives us an opportunity to be casting both deeper. If I think there's trout are going to be around or other fish, I'm going to be casting out there. If I want to target snook or reds, I'm probably going to be casting shallower in that case. And so I'm going to work my way from east to west, right? And then ideally, what I'd like to do then is, if that tide's going to go out, my next traverse is going to be, I'm going to go a little bit further out, right? Because at that point, I've probably got shallower water, and I'm going to work my way back. Now, again, in this case, I may be casting against the wind, or I just may walk all the way back again. But but basically you're kind of zigzagging the flat, right? And either starting shallow and working your way out if it's outgoing water, or if it's deeper, you're going to start and do the opposite, right? If it comes in. But it's basically, I'm zigzagging the flat. So I'm covering as much of that flat as possible. And so how far do I go out? I go out as far as my cast, right? So again, if you imagine I'm going out knee deep, casting towards the shoreline, I'm casting out where my next traverse to the outside is going to be about where my casts ended, right? So I'm not necessarily doubling down on that water.
Makes sense.
But that, again, and if you can kind of visualize what we're doing. But again, it's just kind of zigzagging the flat, and that's actually a pattern. It's called zigzagging for a reason. But you're going to zigzag the flat to cover as much of it as possible. Now, if there's specific structure on a flat that you know is there, and that's really kind of the next step for me, right? So I've considered the winds. I've looked at the tides. The next thing I do is I go to smart fishing spots, or if you don't, if you're not using it, first of all, you're not very smart because you should be using it. But second of all, maybe you're using Google Earth, but some sort of satellite imagery to take a look at that flat. And what you're really trying to identify is, where is the structure? Are there potholes out there? Are there sandbars? Where are the grass flats? Whatever it is. But I want to know what's on that flat. And the reason I want to know is because when I do get to a where I know there might be an oyster bed, I don't want to get right on top of that oyster bed before I'm fishing it, right? I want to be as far away as I can and still hit that oyster bed or around it, so I'm not spooking any of the fish.
Yep.
But I need to know that in advance. Otherwise, you're going to be on top of it before you even realize it's there. So it's getting out and doing your homework and understanding where the structure is. The other thing that I'm going to be looking at is the depth, right? And you've got the 1 foot increments now on there, which is great. It's like if we do have a mangrove shoreline, for instance, right? I want to know, is this a shallow or a deep mangrove shoreline? Because they're fished completely differently, right? A lot of the mangrove shorelines, there's actually fairly deep water up against them, and especially if you're on a higher tide, those fish move way back in under those mangroves, and it makes it really difficult to find fish. But there's other mangrove shorelines where it's really very shallow, right up to the shoreline. But even in those cases, if it's a little bit higher tide, typically you've got the mangroves, you've got a little like runway of sand typically, and then you run into the different, whether it's grass or mixture of grass and sand and going on. But I love fishing that little sand strip close to the mangroves or the edge of the sand strip and where the grass may start, those kinds of things. But you really it's understanding and looking on smart fishing spots or Google Earth to understand, what are you playing with out there? So understanding, again, where's the structure? And then, as you're kind of working through your strategy, how do I get to that structure and how do I work it effectively, right? And the biggest thing I said is not sitting or getting on top of that structure to fish it. It's knowing it's there and being as far away as possible to be stealthy, right? And get those casts out and around it. But again, it takes a little bit of homework. The other thing I tell people too is, listen, everybody's looking for, I've got, they ask people, how many spots do I have? So, I have hundreds of spots up and down the Gulf Coast of Florida. I said, but I've got probably 5 spots that are my go-tos. I call them my back of the hand spots, right? And I tell people, you should have some back of the hand spots. Ideally, it's spots that are closer to your home rather than further away.
Yep.
Because if you only have a little bit of time to fish, go to the places that are close. Spend more time fishing than driving or whatever it might be. But if you get out and fish those spots, day in and day out, you're going to learn them, like I said, like the back of your hand. And you'll know after fishing the same spot for 20, 30, 40, 50 times, you're going to start to notice, I always catch fish along this stretch of mangrove. I always catch fish kind of around this pothole. I catch fish around that oyster bed. And there'll be other areas that you just generally don't catch fish, right? And so what I'm doing is I'm really kind of accelerating my pace to get to the spots where I know that I'm routinely catching fish. And this gets kind of the 90-10 rule, right? I mean, it really is. I mean, 90% of most of these areas don't have fish. So I want to focus on the 10%. There's no better way to know where that 10% is than fishing spots that get to know those spots and fish them consistently, right? Listen, if you go to the same spot 10, 15, 20 times and you're not catching anything, well, it's probably not a really good spot. So go look for another one. What's the next closest spot to your home. But if it has all the things that I just talked about, if it has mangrove shoreline, if it has, mixed bottom, if it has deep water nearby, other structure, it's more than likely going to be a good spot. And the other thing I really didn't mention is you really want tidal flow too, right? You want to have good water movement, ideally, if you're in an area that has water movement. There's no doubt that that's a benefit, but that's certainly an important part of that. But there's no better way to learn a flat than getting out and fishing it. I've got, I'll say that just pick the Dunedin Causeway for one. I fished it probably 1,000 times. I fish it pretty quickly. I know, I catch fish here, and I just get in, I fish those spots. I don't even waste my time anymore in between. Right. But it comes from knowing those spots. But as I tell people, get those back of the hand spots that are close to home that, have fish, under different conditions and different seasons, whatever it might be. And then maybe the last, but, have your couple of confidence lures. So you're not spending all your time switching from one lure to the other. If it's a 2.0, the Slam Shady 2.0, or if it's a new penny tweaker, a gold spoon, I don't care what it is. But have a couple that you can catch fish with and know how to work. And again, don't waste your time. And again, we all experiment. We're all looking for the next greatest fishing lure. And I do that. But for the most part, if I'm out there really looking to catch fish, I may have 3 lures that I'm going to use all day long. And more often than not, it might be one that I have all day long. And I have a lot of clients who, we may start out and it's slow and well, why don't we try another lure? And I'm usually like, it isn't the lure. It's just the fish probably just aren't there, right? Yeah. Now there may be certain times where, okay, I'm gonna, if I've seen a fish follow and not taken a lure or something like that a couple different times, well, then maybe I've got the wrong lure. But more than likely, it's not even the lure. It's either need to speed up the retrieve or slow down the retrieve. I need to fish deeper, or I need to fish shallower. Those are the things that I'm going to do before I'm going to kind of wear out all my options that lure before I switch. But so it's picking great spots. It's learning, how to fish those spots, and then effectively, coming up with a strategy to fish that flat or that spot based upon, the weather, the tide, the season, those kinds of things.
So that's awesome. And I'd love to go into some of your favorite lures here in a second. Assuming someone's maybe newer to wade fishing and they don't have the back of your hand spots yet, what else are you doing when you're reading the water? And maybe I can rephrase this, because I've heard people say, all right, I'm on Smart Fishing Spots, or I'm on Google Satellite Map. And you know what I'm talking about here, where it looks so nice on a satellite map and like, oh man, this looks perfect. This is my spot. And then when you get there, it looks different for whatever reason. Maybe the water's churned up, or maybe it's just a really old satellite picture and a lot of the structure that you saw or potholes aren't there anymore. What's the first thing that you're doing when you're on the water? Are you looking for bait? Is it birds? What are you doing when you're just reading that flat especially in a brand new spot?
Yeah, well, you're looking for activity, right? Whether it's mullet, whether it's other types of bait fish, whether it's birds. But ideally, you want to have activity. Even spots that I've fished in my back of the hand spots, and I get there and I just see nothing going on. My first reaction is, oh man, it's going to be a tough day. And I know those are good spots generally, right? But this one of the reasons they're generally good spots is there's generally a lot of activity, right? But there are some times when they're just not there, and so more often than not, I may just pack. I may just get there and say I'm going to my next spot, and then maybe that's another part of this too, right? I typically have at least 2 or 3 spots in the back of my mind, even though I'm wade fishing, right, that are within close proximity. And I may get out, like you said, I may get in the water, and within 10 minutes, I realize there's nothing going on here. I just go back to my car, I hop in, I get to spot number 2 that I had targeted, and I've got enough spots that I can get to 3 different spots within that are within 10 minutes of each other, and are far enough away or different enough conditions that they're not so close that if it's bad in one spot, it's likely to be bad in the other as well, yep. Right? There's one maybe on the east side, one might be on the west side. One might be closer to deeper water, one might be closer to shallower water. But for the most part, I do have alternatives that I look at. But listen, I try not to waste my time. And listen, you may get, and it happens. I've got 3 great spots. I go to spot 1, nothing's going on. I go to spot 2, nothing's going on. I go to spot 3, nothing's going on. Right. So then you're just like, okay, it's going to be a tough day. So I'll stay at spot 3 and I'll just work it as hard as I can. And there's days when it's not obvious that the fish are there or they're not all that active, and you have to figure them out. And especially if they happen to be a little bit deeper, it's really tough to know that they're actually there, right? And so it's easier to tell when the fish are in shallower areas than it is if they're in deeper areas. And so that's but yeah, sometimes it just doesn't happen. And so then you need to decide: do I go home? And typically, I'd rather fish for 2 hours and not catch anything than go home, because that's what I like to do. But anyway, and I think that's the other thing I love about fishing is I never have a bad day fishing, because even if I don't catch anything, it's my calm place. It's where I don't think about anything else, that all the stuff that's going on in the world. I'm focusing on my fishing. I'm focusing on the scenery. I'm focusing on whatever wildlife there is around there. And that's why, again, one of the reasons I love wade fishing. It's just me and whatever else is out there.
I love it. And yeah, two different ways to find some pretty good wade fishing spots using Smart Fishing Spots in particular. One, I don't know if you've even seen this yet, because it's brand new, Dave, but it's the kayak launch spots. Have you seen that?
I have. So most of the kayak launch spots, I mean, I've probably been there.
Yeah.
As I said, I've been doing this for 40 years, from Cedar Key down to Naples, and I mean, there aren't a lot of spots that you can crawl into the mangroves to a flat that I haven't been to at some point.
Yeah.
But no, I think it is good. It's probably helpful to a lot of people who haven't had the opportunity to scour the coast like I have. But I love it when I find a new spot or somebody points that out, and I'm not ashamed of, what? Wow, I've never fished that spot.
Yep.
And in fact, the guys that I fish with fairly frequently, they love to try to find a spot I've never been to, and say, well, what do you think? And they're just waiting for me to say I've never fished it. And if I do, then I'm like, let's go, let's give it a shot.
Yeah.
That to me is, in fact, my favorite thing about fishing these days. I love going somewhere I've never been before. Doing my homework, whether it's Smart Fishing Spots, Google Earth, whatever, understanding what the conditions I'm going to be facing, and then going out and finding the fish. That's why I love going to Texas. I'll go to spots where I fished before, but I spend more time going to spots I haven't been, just trying to find. To me, the hunt is really probably the part I enjoy the most. And maybe that sounds a little ironic. And I love getting that hook, feeling that hit. That may be the second best part of it. And landing the fish to me is almost incidental to some extent. I mean, it's finding them, getting that hit, and then, wow, okay, that's to me, that's where I get the adrenaline rush.
I love it. Well, yeah. So if you guys need help, check out the kayak launch spots. There's over 11,000 of them and more being added every week. And I think a lot of people who are into wade fishing might disregard it, say, oh, that's for kayakers. But you think about it. Yeah. If there's a place to safely launch a kayak, which most of them are, meaning it's not like a seawall where it drops off 10
right.
feet. Most of them have some shoreline, have a little sand, a little air to launch a kayak safely. It's also a great place to wade out and fish. The other one is the public land layer that we have. We've heard some really cool testimonials from people that said, hey, I turned this on. I didn't realize this property, like almost within my neighborhood, was public, that I could go fish off, that was, touching salt water. And so that was eye-opening, seeing some of the land that you might think is even in residential areas that you probably just think, oh, someone must own that, never built on it, and it happens to be government or state or city owned, and you're legally allowed to go across that. And not all the cases, you can make sure that you there's no signs that say no trespassing. But in most cases, if it's state or city or government owned, and there's not some sort of municipality or, some sort of power generator on there, usually you're able to freely go across it and go wade fishing off of it. So definitely check those two different layers out. Super, super helpful to give you an idea on some new areas to try.
Yeah, well, in fact, I was fishing down in Inglewood last week, and actually found a spot that way. Somebody had told me about, hey, yeah, there's a spot at the very north end of Lemon Bay Park down there that you can access. I'm looking on Google Earth. I'm like, I don't see any access point there. And turns out there's a little tiny strip of land that goes between two houses. It's really weird. That allows you to walk from a road that you can park at, walk right between those two houses, and then get to the north end of the park. And there's actually a little spot that you can sneak through the mangroves and get out to this area that I used to have to wait like 1.5 miles to get there. But that's how we found it. And so it is a great update. The other thing too, listen, boat ramps is another one. A lot of the boat ramps have adjacent areas that you can wade fish as well.
Yep.
But there's really nothing better than just getting out and driving up and down, coastline and looking for those little spots.
I love it. All right, let's move over to your lures. What are your top 3, 4, 5 that you never leave home without? I know with wade fishing, you want to keep it simple. You don't want to be sitting there changing out all the time. And like Pat said, you guys listen to Pat's podcast where he fished with just a topwater lure for 1 year. It was amazing podcast, by the way. And even Kent Freeman, who we had on, I guess, the week prior to that, who's done a ton of tournament fishing, now is the director of the Power Pole Redfish series. And he said the same thing, man, I don't go out with much. I keep it really, really simple. Love to hear your thoughts on your favorite lures and how you keep it simple.
Yeah. And again, I've keeping it simple has kind of been my mantra from the beginning. One of the reasons why I love wade fishing. Although I will have to admit that my, I think what do you call it, my little fanny pack that I always carry with me, I've gotten a bigger fanny pack than I used to, and it's kind of a shame. And I'm going to blame Salt Strong on it partly because before you guys were getting into the lures, I had my favorites, and so I've added the Salt Strong products to my bag, and haven't taken out the others yet. I have to admit, as I told you earlier today, I'm getting close to taking some of these out, as much as I hate to. But so first of all, I guess I have to say the Prawn Junior may be my number one now, and it was probably not even in my top 5.
What color?
It maybe
like the natural color.
Yeah, just the natural color. And I know some guys that fish the other colors, and I think the new penny in particular. But I only bring the natural with me. I also will tell you I prefer the Prawn Junior over the regular the prawn. I do much better with the smaller than I do with the larger. And I'm typically fishing on maybe as light as a 16th, more often than not on an 1/8 ounce. And occasionally on a 1/4 ounce open jig head, ideally for me. But I've been killing the trout on it, and that was kind of where I first started using it. More wintertime, fishing a little bit slower, some of the deeper areas, and it was just killing it. It kind of goes back to using the old DOA shrimp, and now I'm blanking out on the name of the shrimp, but that was a great lure and has been for a long time. But the prawn and the Prawn Junior are just a much better lure, much more versatile. I think I can vary the weights on them and really prefer the look and the action to it. But it's really and so that was kind of where I did, and then I started fishing some shallower areas, and all of a sudden I started picking up redfish on it. Right now I was fishing a little bit differently, and I probably fish it shallower than a lot of people do. And I'll fish, but I'll actually work it quite a bit quicker and almost more like a jerk bait when I get a little bit shallower. But I'll tell you, the redfish are hot on that thing, as well as the snook. 2 weeks ago, I was in a spot where I walked up on this sand flat adjacent to some deeper water, and it was loaded with redfish and snook. And I threw anything and everything I had. I threw the tweaker at it. I tried the spoon. I tried, a number of things. And these things were just laughing at me. And I walked all the way through, and I'm coming back. And I said, okay, I'm looking to throw them back. What happened? I said, you know what? I haven't thrown the prawn. And the reason I hadn't thrown the prawn is because it was maybe 1.5 feet, 2 foot of water tops. I'm like, what the heck? So I actually put it on a 16th ounce jig head. and I was throwing downwind, and so I could get a fairly decent distance with it. And all of a sudden, the redfish in particular just turned on it, and it was one after another. The guy I was fishing with wasn't convinced, and he continued to use a paddle tail and was not getting anything. As soon as he put that prawn on, it was game over. But I mean, it was dramatic, and so that thing just continues to move up. And if it's not my number one, maybe it's number two, but it's right there at the top. And I'm fishing it not just in the winter anymore. I'm fishing it year round, and I'm fishing it with as light as a 16th and up to even a quarter ounce if I need to.
That's good.
But it's really it's really I've been impressed with it. In fact, you go look at my orders. I don't know how many 100 bags I've bought over the last several months, but it's great, and I've turned a lot of my clients onto it as well. So the other one that's up there, let's just say a jerk bait for right now, right, is probably my number one or number two. And anybody that's fished with me or seen a lot of my other stuff knows that I've been a fan of the MirrOlure Little John for a long, long time, and it's a great lure. It really is. It's versatile. I fish it year round. I can fish it slow. I can fish it fast, deep, shallow, whatever. But when the tweaker came out, I was actually fishing with Luke on the beach maybe a month ago, and he put that on with a. He was actually fishing it on a Haas Helix twist lock.
Yep.
Yeah, weighted twist lock. And was picking up some nice fish on it. So I said, "What the heck?" So I threw it on. Actually, I'm just a bare jig head, and I started picking them. I'm like, "Wow, this is really this thing really kind of was working." And so I really started using it quite a bit. And where initially I hands down, it's a better jerk bait than the Little John if you're fishing weedless, because the Little John, really one of the things that's not great about it, it's very dense. It's hard to get a good hookup on it. If you're fishing weedless.
Yep.
Whereas with the tweaker, it's ideal for it. It's soft enough. You got the little slot in there and all that. But I started using it with just a plain jig head, which is my preference if I can. And I've just been killing it. And I'm talking again, shallow, even medium and even deeper depths. But, this time of year, I'm fishing a lot of shorelines. And so I may be fishing as light as a 16th. More often than not, I'm fishing an eighth and occasionally a quarter. But that tweaker and my two colors, really, I love that in either the New Penny or the Slam Shady. And at this point, if I've got a couple of rods with me, more than likely one of those is going to be rigged with the tweaker. But it really is. It's very versatile. I think, as I mentioned to you, there's, maybe another color or two I'd love to see you guys, consider. But right now, as I said, Slam Shady and or the New Penny are really kind of my go-tos at this point. And either, rigged weedless or on a bare jig, I find it to be equally effective.
Yeah, and it will, as we talked about offline one time, that the Polk County tweaker, it's purposely made to outcast. And even, I think, outskip the Little John, and I'd love to hear your response to that if you ever have tried it.
It definitely outskips it. There's no doubt about it. And it is more aerodynamic, and it might, I guess it's probably a little bit heavier maybe than the Little John, but
slightly,
it definitely, and that's why I can fish it with a 16th ounce jig head and still get a good long cast on, right, and have control. But it definitely skips better than the Little John. And so, as I said, I mean, the thing has really moved up on my list. Whereas, I've got so many great memories of my Little John. I hate to move it out, but it's slowly moving down. In fact, I probably should turn my hat around here right now because I had my MirrOlure hat on. But in any event, I really do like the tweaker. But listen, I still think Little John has its place and is a really good lure. And I'll probably have one in my casket when I die. So those certainly are up there in the top. Listen, a paddle tail, and as I mentioned to you, I tend to like smaller rather than bigger lures. Maybe there's something to big fish like big lures, or big baits, but I don't mind catching a bunch of small fish while I'm waiting for that big fish to hit. And every one of them, and actually all of my biggest snook, trout, and redfish were all caught on a 3-inch paddle tail. And I fish, jerk baits an awful lot, and I catch a lot of fish on them, but small baits catch big fish as well.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't mind if I have to catch, a few 20-inch snook waiting for that 40-incher. I'm okay with that. And they may not hit that, the big old lure. So the 2.0 paddle tail, and again, my two favorite colors are Slam Shady and New Penny. I try to keep it simple. So you're more than likely, if you look at my bag, I'm going to have two colors of the soft plastics. It's either going to be, Slam Shady or New Penny or both, whether it's the jerk bait or whether it's, the tweaker or it's the paddle tail. But yeah, I mean, that should be in everybody's bag. It's just so versatile. You can fish it anywhere in the water column, depending upon whether you're fishing it with whatever weight the jig is. It can be fished weedless. It can be fished with a bare jig head. Again, I'm fishing with bare jig heads much more often than I am with weedless. And I tend to fish a little bit heavier jig heads than most people do. And my feeling is I want to fish the heaviest jig that I can. That's not going to continuously get me caught up in whatever the bottom structure is, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it might require me to reel a little bit faster or to keep that rod tip higher or both to keep it from getting caught up. But if I'm on a shallow flat and the fish are there, I can't reel in any quicker than a redfish can swim. I promise you.
Yeah.
They'll chase it down. But I really, the paddle tail has to be in there. And maybe if you only have one bait, maybe that's it. Because it is just so versatile.
Yeah. And anyone can use it, right?
Yeah.
Could just anyone could just straight retrieve at worst case.
Well, and the other a testament to it as well, right? When I get inexperienced fishermen on a charter, first thing I do is I put a paddle tail on there, and they say, "What do I need to do?" Just reel it in, right? And that's really all it is. And they're like, "Well, don't I need to be doing something?" I'm saying, "Nope, just reel it in, right? And try to keep it just above the bottom if you can, and wait for the hit. When you feel the hit, just give a little tug on that hook, and you're going to have fish on it." And again, I don't know what better testament there is than that's the easiest way to go about it. Then maybe my last, I guess if we're talking the top 5, I love my weedless gold spoon, the Johnson, and the Johnson Silver Minnow, which really is gold in my case, is it's the weedless half-ounce spoon is the one I prefer.
Yep.
And I use the half-ounce all year round and under almost any condition, rather than have 2 or 3 different, size spoons. I just keep the half-ounce in there, and I've done extremely well. I call it redfish candy. I think the redfish absolutely love chasing that thing down, and I love the hit I get on that. That's another one. It's very simple. It's basically you throw it out and you're reeling it in.
Yep.
And when that fish hits, it's just jolting most of the time. It just stops your lure in its tracks, and I just love that hit. And more often than not, when you get hit with the spoon, that fish is on and you're not going to lose it. The other little secret about the gold spoon is snook love it. And I don't care whether it's on the flat, but they especially love it when I'm fishing on the beach. And in the summertime, when I'm fishing over rocky bottom, I love throwing that spoon in. And when I can hear it or feel it kind of clinking off a rock as I'm doing that, it just drives those snook crazy. It really does. And the other thing that happens is almost every time you hook a snook on that gold spoon, it's caught right under the front of the mouth. And so it's not getting an opportunity. You don't have that leader in the mouth. And so it's not abrading it. So I can fish a little lighter leader. I mean, instead of using 30, I might be fishing 20 with the gold spoon, which might get me a few more bites. And at the end of the day, I'm not losing fish that I might if I had a jig or with either a paddle tail or a tweaker on there. But to me, it's really a great lure. Obviously, it's durable. The other thing, if there's puffers around, that's the downside to the paddle tail, right? Is that if you get on a flat where there's a ton of pinfish or puffers, you're going to go through them. Now, listen. As a lure manufacturer, you should be thanking those puffers, and you should probably think about stocking them in a lot of the areas that we fish, because
love-hate relationship. Unfortunately, I love fishing, a lot myself, and they drive me absolutely bonkers.
Yeah, I got you. This should be on your payroll though. But in that case, again, the other thing is I love to work that spoon because not even a puffer can bite off the end of a gold spoon. So, but that's, the one obvious that I've left out of there, and I should say I love fishing is topwater, right? Whether it's, a moonwalker, walk the dog style bait or a prop bait or a chugger, whatever. I love fishing topwater. But the fact is, I catch a lot more fish using subsurface lures, whether it's a soft plastic spoon or even the hard baits. But listen, there are days, and I might tell you it might be worth catching, one fish on a blow up on the topwater versus 5 that I might catch, subsurface or on a jig, and you just kind of got to weigh it out. But at the end of the day, if it really comes down to catching the most fish, as much as I love fishing topwater, I catch a lot more fish with subsurface lures than I do with topwater lures. But you have to, you have to make the decision what's more important, and what's the adrenaline rush, right?
Yep.
Kind of like, do you want to spend all day hunting for for one tarpon, or do you want to go out and catch 100 trout, right? So, it's really comes down to personal choice.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well, Wader Dave, super helpful as always. I know we'll have you back on again. I feel like every season we can probably do one of these things because it does shift, as you said. You in particular kind of fish a lot of the same spots, but fish them completely different depending on the time of year. So, where can people learn more about you if they don't know who you are, if that's somehow possible? But 2, even book charters with you because you're still doing some charters out there and. Always
sure.
A good time fishing with Wader Dave.
Yeah, you can reach me at my website, which is www.wadersguide.com. So it's WADERSGUIDE.com. I'm sure maybe you'll put a little, or we can put some sort of link on there, but wadersguide.com. I'm on Instagram at Wader Dave. A lot of folks are picking me up there as well, or through YouTube as well. But I'm not that hard to get a hold of. By the way, I do offer all Salt Strong insiders a 10% discount on guided wade fishing trips as well. And insiders make up probably 75 or 80% of my clientele. So
cool.
Thank you, and thank all the insiders. In fact, I'm up here in Alligator Point this weekend with 2 other insiders. And even with all of our expertise and knowledge, we're struggling. So I'm hoping that we can find some fish ourselves later today or tomorrow. But thanks again for the opportunity. I enjoy doing these with you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'll be checking the insider community where Wader Dave also spends some time and is super helpful in there, just sharing tips, sharing what's working. And I'll be looking for your fishing report there in that area.
Great. I'll be sure to get some out there.
Cool. Well, thank you guys. If you have any questions, comment down below. Make sure to go like and subscribe Wader Dave there on Instagram. And if we could do anything to help you or any specific questions, let us know. We're here to help. Appreciate it. Thanks,
Take
Dave.
care.
'Cause fishing, it's in my soul. It was